My name is Alara Dane, and a year ago, I was crying in a cramped restroom stall with a cardboard box full of my office belongings at my feet. The stall walls were thin. I could hear two of my now former coworkers whispering just outside the bathroom door. She was sweet, but honestly, not cut out for high-pressure campaigns. I know. Poor thing. Did you hear what Grant said? Too soft and too slow. Brutal. I waited until their voices faded before stepping out, carefully avoiding my reflection in the mirror. That day, I didn't want to see my face, didn't want to see the person I had become after months of being gaslit, sidelined, and underestimated. When I was hired at Blue Wave Strategies as a junior marketing coordinator, I was ecstatic. It was my first major job after college, and I had landed it at one of the fastest-growing creative agencies in the city. I had dreams of running campaigns that moved people, of crafting brand stories that felt honest and human. I came with passion, work ethic, and an eye for what resonated. But from the beginning, I didn't fit the mold. The culture at Blue Wave was sleek and ruthless. Brainstorm sessions were battlegrounds, and whoever talked the loudest usually got their ideas approved. I was never loud. I liked to observe, to understand the clients on a deeper level before offering my thoughts. I took my time not because I was slow, but because I wanted things done right. To Grant Montrose, my creative director, this made me a liability. He was tall, intimidating, with a permanently furrowed brow and an obsession with disruption. I once suggested a subtle, emotionally grounded campaign for a wellness brand. He called it Yoga Pants Poetry and replaced it with something louder, flashier, and utterly soulless. He also had this habit of calling me kiddo, even though I was 26. I hated that word. It wasn't affectionate, was a dismissal, wrapped in condescension. At first I thought I was being too sensitive, so I worked harder. I stayed late. I offered to proofread decks, organize brand audits, even take notes in meetings I wasn't invited to. I watched everyone else cut corners and still get praise while I did things by the book and got nothing but indifference. But the breaking point came during a client pitch for a major sustainable fashion brand. Aurelia. I had spent weeks researching their founder's story, carefully crafting a presentation that wove their ethos into every campaign element: authenticity, legacy, and beauty and imperfection. I even included a concept built around the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, symbolizing resilience and history. Grant tossed my work aside. He went with a tone-deaf tagline: be bold, be looks, be you. He plastered it over glossy stock images of generic models that looked nothing like Aurelia's diverse customer base. The client hated it. They chose another agency. That's when Grant snapped. We're not here to make people cry, Alara. We're here to sell. A week later, I was let go during a team restructure. No notice, no thank you, just a quick meeting with HR and a condescending exit email about how I had potential that might blossom in a different environment. And just like that, I was out. No job, no savings because I had been pouring most of my paycheck into paying off student loans, and no idea what came next. I went home that night to my tiny studio apartment, placed the box of belongings in the corner, and sat in the dark for hours. I should have broken. I should have given up. But something cracked open inside me instead. Not anger, not even sadness anymore. Clarity. They had seen me as fragile, replaceable, too soft for the cold, sharp edges of their marketing empire. But I had seen something they hadn't. I had seen how clients responded to storytelling that felt human. How people lit up when they saw themselves reflected in a brand's message. How real connection beat noise every single time. And maybe, just maybe, that softness they mocked was actually my superpower. So I made a decision. I was going to build something better, not just for me, but for every other person who'd ever been told they were too kind, too thoughtful, too emotional to make it in business. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have a plan, or money, or connections, but I had fire. And sometimes, fire is all you need to start building from the ashes. I spent the first week of unemployment doing what most people do in my position, staring at job listings that made my stomach twist. Every posting sounded like a sanitized version of the environment I had just escaped: fast-paced, aggressive high-performance results driven. Nowhere did I see words like empathetic, story-centered, or collaborative. So, I stopped looking, and I started writing. At first it was a manifesto, a messy midnight-fueled brain dump of everything I believed about marketing: how people want to be seen, not sold to. How the world is saturated with noise but starving for meaning. How storytelling, real storytelling, had the power to connect people to brands in a way no metric or algorithm ever could. Then it became something more. A business plan. I called it Kindred. The name came from the idea of kinship not by blood, but by understanding. A brand studio built on radical empathy, where every campaign would begin with listening, not pitching. Where we didn't chase virality, we cultivated resonance. I had no clients, no capital, and no clue what I was doing. But I had my laptop, a free Canva account, and the tiniest flicker of belief. I started building the Kindred website myself. I stayed up until 3 a.m. most nights, writing copy that felt like a promise to every founder who'd ever felt unseen. Every brand that didn't want to scream just to be heard. When I wasn't building, I was freelancing to stay afloat, copywriting newsletters, writing bios, ghostwriting blog posts. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to buy time. Then came my first break. A friend from college ran a handmade skincare brand called NTMA. She had seen a post I wrote on LinkedIn about my philosophy and reached out. "We're launching a new product line," she said. "I need someone who gets it. Who can help us tell our story, not just push product." I nearly cried. We worked on a small budget, but with enormous trust. I spent hours interviewing her and her team, learning the rituals and values behind each product. We created a digital campaign called Rooted in Ritual, with slow, tender visuals and a voice that sounded like a friend, not a sales rep. It blew up, not in a viral. Millions of views way, but in the ways that mattered. Engagement doubled. DMs were full of stories from customers sharing their own skin journeys. Her product sold out in 4 days. Zara tagged me in every post. And just like that, the second client came. Then the third. By month 3, I was running Kindred out of a corner table in a local co-working space. I didn't even have a team yet, just a few freelancers I paid as much as I could afford. But the work was good. We weren't just making ads, we were making brands feel alive. I would sit with founders who were used to consultants, treating them like cash machines, and watch their whole demeanor shift when I asked them, "What's the real reason you started this?" I didn't use fancy jargon. I asked about their grandmothers, their childhoods, their heartbreaks, and I wove those truths into their campaigns. They cried. Sometimes, and then they hired me. Grant used to say, "Emotion doesn't convert." But our campaigns, they were converting at 3 times the industry average. Because when you see yourself in a story, you trust it. You remember it. You act on it. We were just starting to gain momentum when something unexpected happened. Lost Aurelia, the sustainable fashion brand Grant had botched. And guess who picked them up? Kindred. They came to us through a referral and didn't even realize I was behind the agency at first. When they did, the head of marketing, Rowan's, sent me a message. "We thought you were the intern. Turns out, you were the only one who actually saw us." I wanted to frame it. We relaunched Aurelia's campaign under the kintsugi concept. I had proposed a year before the one Grant had laughed out of the room. It went viral this time. The world was ready for gold-filled cracks and stories about healing, and so was I. By month 5, I hired my first full-time employee. By month 8, Kindred had 5 team members and an office team, sun-drenched, full of houseplants and thrifted furniture. We worked out of a space with no air conditioning, but endless heart, and then came the email. From Grant, subject line, "Let's talk." I stared at the subject line for a full minute before I opened it. From Grant Montrose to ELARA at kindredstudio.co subject, "Let's talk, Alara." I've been following Kindred's growth, very impressive work. We're currently exploring partnerships with emerging creative studios for some of our more human-centered clients. I'd love to schedule a call to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Let me know your availability. Acknowledgement of what had happened. No reference to the firing, the bathroom whispers, the file box with my name on it. Just a polished pitch like we were old colleagues, peers. I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of our little studio, my team paused mid-lunch. "Everything okay?" asked Jules, my brand strategist. I turned my laptop to show them the email. They burst into laughter. "You've got to be kidding me," she said. "I'm not," I replied, "but I wish I were." After the laughter faded, I sat quietly for a moment, staring at Grant's name on my screen. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Not really. I felt powerful. A year ago, I would have read that email with trembling hands, desperate for approval, wondering if this meant I was finally good enough. But now, I had built something of my own. From nothing, with no favors, no venture capital, No glossy PR. Just stories. Just truth. I drafted a reply. Subject, let's talk. Hi Grant, thank you for reaching out. I do remember our time at Blue Wave quite clearly. At this time, Kindred is focused on deep mission-aligned client partnerships. We've found that the best results happen when values are shared from the very beginning. I'm sure you'll find the right creative fit elsewhere. Wishing you all the best. I reread it twice before clicking send. It was polite, professional, but if you read between the lines, it said exactly what I wanted it to say. You had your chance. You didn't see me, and now, you don't get to claim me. The next day, I got a second email from someone else at Blue Wave. Apparently, things weren't going well. They had lost 2 major clients. Staff turnover was high. Word had spread that a culture of intimidation had taken root at the leadership level. Their HR director had quietly resigned after a whistleblower complaint. It wasn't just karma. It was the natural result of building a company where people were afraid to speak, to feel, to care, where numbers mattered more than names, where emotion was a liability instead of a strength. Meanwhile, Kindred was growing faster than I could keep up. We had just signed our 12th client. We were hiring again. I had to upgrade our server capacity. I even got a feature in Brand Human magazine, how one woman's empathy-based strategy is redefining modern marketing. And then, a moment that changed everything. Zara, my first client, called me late one evening. You should look at the news, she said. I opened the article she sent. Blue Wave to close to offices amid restructuring after leadership shakeup. The body of the article, sources close to the agency site, internal tensions and client departures stemming from a perceived lack of brand authenticity and shifting consumer expectations. And there, buried in the third paragraph, was the quote that took my breath away. We realize now that marketing can no longer rely solely on performance metrics, said a Blue Wave spokesperson. Consumers want stories. They want empathy. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. There it was. The very word empathy they'd mocked when I first mentioned it in a campaign meeting. The word Grant had once called fluff. Now it was the lifeline of their damage control. I didn't dance. I didn't gloat. But inside me, something finally settled. Validation, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever been told they were too emotional, too gentle, too human for business. Turns out, humanity is the business. A few weeks after the article dropped, I was invited to speak at a local entrepreneurship summit. I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't something I had ever felt confident about, especially not in front of polished CEOs and investors in tailored suits. But then I thought about the girl I was a year ago. The one in the bathroom stall with swollen eyes and a cardboard box. She would have killed for someone to tell her she wasn't the problem, so I said yes. The room was larger than I expected, over 200 seats, bright white lights, cameras streaming the event live. I stood backstage in my soft beige blazer, palms damp, heart pounding. Then the announcer said my name. I stepped out. The crowd applauded politely, expecting a polished story of growth and strategy, maybe a few numbers and tips. Instead, I told them about the bathroom stall. I told them about the humiliation, about being called too soft, about being dismissed before I even had a chance to show what I was capable of. And then I told them what happened when I stopped trying to become what the business world expected, and instead, leaned into what made me different. I spoke about empathy, not as a buzzword, as a force, as the missing link between brands and the people they serve, as the bridge between intention and impact, as the reason Kindred existed. By the time I finished, the applause was real. People stood. A few came up to me afterward and said things I never expected to hear. I've been scared to lead with empathy my entire career. I thought I had to leave who I was at the door to be taken seriously. Thank you for saying what so many of us are afraid to. Later that night, when I got back to the office, Jules had left a small note on my desk. You're not just building a company, you're building a mirror so others can finally see themselves. I cried. Not because I was sad or scared, but because I was proud of the broken girl I used to be, of the quiet woman I became, of the fire that never turned to bitterness. A month later, I was offered a buyout. A major consulting firm, known for acquiring fast-growing agencies, approached me with a deal that would have made me a millionaire overnight. They promised freedom, resources, expansion. But I said no, not because the offer wasn't generous, but because Kindred wasn't for sale. You don't sell your soul once you finally reclaim it. Instead, I doubled down. We opened a second office in Austin. We started a podcast called the Soft Power Sessions, interviewing founders, creatives, and visionaries who had been dismissed, doubted, and underestimated only to rise. And yes, we told their stories too. A year and a half after I was fired, Blue Wave officially shuttered. Grant. Last I heard, he had taken a consulting role overseas. His LinkedIn tagline now reads, "Helping brands reconnect through authentic emotional intelligence." Oh, the irony. I don't hate him. I genuinely hope he grows into the words he's finally using. But as for me, I'm not chasing anyone's approval anymore. I don't need permission to be the kind of leader I needed when I started. I'm no longer the girl with the cardboard box. I'm the woman who built something beautiful out of being broken. And if you ever feel like your kindness is a weakness, let me tell you this: empathy is not the opposite of strength, it is the foundation of it.